Mardi Gras used to run festivals in conjunction with different cinemas, and for a couple of years they'd been running them with the Academy Twin Cinema in Oxford Street. There was a dispute between Mardi Gras and the Academy Twin at the beginning of 1993, I think about money or something, which led to Mardi Gras calling for a boycott of the festival. But a bunch of us who were filmmakers thought that at that point in time that we didn't like the idea of a film festival being boycotted, and we didn't really like the idea that the whole process wasn't involving filmmakers and artists. And so somebody put out a handbill calling for a meeting, and the handbill had a bit of a strong anti-Mardi Gras tone to it. But when we got together, we started looking a bit more deeply about how we could become as filmmakers in organising a festival. We got together and formed Queer Screen around about March or April 1993. And then after all the anti-Mardi Gras rhetoric, we went straight back to Mardi Gras and asked them for lots of money to put on a film festival, and had our first festival in September 1993, the first Sydney International Queer Film and Video Festival. I mean, in the early 90s, it's obviously a very, very different world to now, pre-internet. You know, I mean, now you have like the inclusion of gay and lesbian characters in mainstream TV shows and films and videos and things like that. Back then, there was very few things happening. It was the old classics and cliches of, you know, the serial killers, the bad people, the sissies, just all the extremes. A lot of people were questioning a lot of those notions. I mean, that's why we were Queer Screen. That's why the first film festival was a queer international film festival, because at a time when, you know, there was a lot of our friends getting sick and dying of AIDS. It was a very different world at the time, and that led to a lot of questioning of all the sorts of structures we'd come to assume, including, you know, basic notions of gay and lesbian and things like that. So it was really about creating some sort of culture, any sort of culture, with, you know, basic visibility being a political purpose.
Mardi Gras had collapsed in 2002 and had gone bankrupt, and so very suddenly the basic funding for Queer Screen ended. It was like there had been some peak, some amazing nirvana of queer culture in the city, and that people now had experienced all of that. Things were becoming a lot more diverse, they were getting spread a lot more through the culture, and people were disappearing. What we tried to do in quite a short period of time was to put in place a sort of more professional arts organisation approach. And we went looking for the basic things that any kind of not-for-profit arts organisation might need. We also approached a lot of the film organisations that support filmmaking and also festivals in the country. We started really, you know, jumping up and down and saying, you know, we think that the queer stories that are being shown in these festivals are really important in terms of generating new work, that even if, you know, some of the films that are shown in Queer Screen are not perfect, what they're doing is they're creating a culture where work is being practiced.
I've been with the organisation for the last 3 years, working with Lex Lindsay, who was the festival director for 5 years. We really started to look at how we could try and assist Australian queer identified filmmakers more, and be really a lot more active in that space, as well as screening queer films. So I feel really pleased that in the last couple of years we've been able to commission a few short films made by some of Sydney's finest queer filmmakers. A large film festival in San Francisco that everyone would know, Frameline, has had a finishing fund for years, and it would really be a dream of ours at Queer Screen, I think, to be able to be in a position financially where we could have filmmakers accessing funds for their projects, whether it be at a development stage, production stage, or finishing fund. But that's certainly something the board and I, as the festival director, would like to see the organisation go.
We formed at a time where the types of work that was being made were starting to vary a bit more. Films that were queer also in their structure, not just their subject matter. We had a lot of experimental work, but then at the same time you had some of these mainstream representations starting to come out, which were directed by people from within the subcultures themselves. By the second festival, which Leonie Knight and I coordinated, we had the first My Queer Career with 3 full sessions of, we used to show every single thing that was submitted at that stage. I think after a while we decided, no, we needed to actually showcase some of them, but show the rest of them in another context.
The filmmaking community, the queer filmmaking community, was bubbling along, I think, quite well. I think what had happened is that the way that people were watching things had changed, and also that the kind of work that was being made was starting to shift. So you were looking at digital artists who were making work for galleries. So one of the things, for instance, we did Queer Pixels. And so for one film festival, we had computers set up in the foyer of the Academy Twin, and there were short digital works made by artists. We were trying to kind of look at what all those possibilities were and generate a new way of being queer screen.
Our first festival in 1993, probably should go down the history that it was not a financial success, that it had lots of problems and disputes within the organisation, very little publicity, disastrous box office, all sorts of things. And to me, the big moment was that in 6 months we managed to, after a bit of a revolution in the organisation, that we managed to turn it around and have a very successful festival in February '94 that basically turned around the entire finances of the organisation. And that to me was a big thing. It was like turning something that I'd never done before, just with a group of people in an airless office in the Chevelle Cinema up the top, throwing together this film festival that ran for 2 weeks with no experience whatsoever, and then having that be a success.
As long as we live in a world where gays, lesbians, transgender people, anyone who sits outside of that kind of mainstream sexual universe, as long as all those people's stories need to be told, we need queer screen. I think the idea that the mainstream now is kind of telling our stories is just total fabrication. It's not. It's telling the easiest stories, the most accessible, the least challenging. One of my favourite memories of my time at Queer Screen was the showing of Greg Araki's Mysterious Skin. He actually made a choice as a queer filmmaker not to screen what was going to be a mainstream film. He made a choice to actually premiere that in our festival. In the middle of it, Philip Ruddock, in response to some complaints, had actually requested that the film be sent back to classification. At that time it was R-rated, which was fine for the festival, but he actually wanted it banned. Queer Screen actually had to make a decision about whether to go ahead with the screening, and we made a decision that we would. Those kinds of moments, to me, were still, the heart of what we were doing, because we were willing to kind of take that risk.
Looking at the relevance of Queer Screen then, as opposed to now, it was a bit harsh, a bit of a harsher world back then, and there was perhaps more of a stronger political need that way. Because we still had a lot of people being beaten up and bashed, but I still think that all representations of gay and lesbian people within culture are very, very important on an international level now, because I think that's where, in some ways, it has a focus. I mean, we have the Kill the Gays bill in Africa. We have a large international movement happening in terms of the position of women in different cultures, and I think all of those things. But I think it's that the visibility of just some of these basic things about sexuality and gender and things like that just need to be out there in the world, because everything we do is for an international audience these days.
Right now in 2013 there's a lot of political discussion around equal rights and human rights, so same-sex marriage, same-sex parenting, how different cultures are dealing with being out or not out about their sexuality, because a lot of them are looking at what their long-term partnerships look like. There is really like a collaboration or a synergy between queer culture in a broader context and screen. When I think about what the importance of a festival is it's a shared experience, and I don't think it's as easy to have that experience at home or on the internet, because you're also sharing it with a room filled with like-minded, wonderful people who are there together for the same reason. It's such a necessary place to be. Well, Queer Screen is a necessary organisation to have. There's a lot of kind of contemporary stories out there that that are really exciting and fresh. So hopefully 2013's festival will, be a corker.